Hey everybody, I'm Miss Wilson and I'll be your careers teacher this semester. I'm a teacher at Dr. Frank J. Hayden Secondary School in Burlington, see, Hayden Huskies, and I also teach English and sometimes special ed and sometimes tech. So before I became a teacher, I worked in Toronto as a magazine editor, so I've had a bit of experience in a couple of different careers, but we'll talk more about that later. Rather than do a typical introductory speech where I just tell you a bunch of random things about myself, most of which you probably don't care about, since this is a careers class, I thought I would share a list of every job I've ever had. Now, I started working when I was about 14, so a little bit younger than you guys, and I'm older than 14 now. So this is a pretty long list, but I'll try to go fast. So first job I ever had was as babysitter. My mom paid me the whopping sum of 50 cents per day to watch my sister after school. And no, I'm not old enough that back in my day 50 cents per day was a lot of money. It really was not. My next experience in being severely underpaid was working as a carrier for the local newspaper. I think I got paid a half-cent for every flyer that I delivered. So you can tell that added up really quickly. My first real job was working for the public library. I worked downstairs putting labels on all of the books and shelving books, and it wasn't super thrilling, but it was a really good job and it gave me a lot of skills. I worked that job all through high school. I did a quick stint doing door-to-door sales. I made 0 sales because no one really wants to buy anything when you knock on their door and try to sell it to them. But I did in the middle of summer and people were really nice and a lot of people gave me popsicles. So it wasn't all bad. It only lasted about 3 weeks. I did a stint working at a sporting goods store as a cashier and a sales associate. I got really good at selling shoes and winter coats and learned that I am terrible at commission sales. So my next job at a clothing store was way better. I just got to kind of fold jeans and help people, and I didn't have to worry about making my sales targets and pressuring people into buying things that they didn't need, which I'm not very good at. I then worked for a summer as an office assistant at a home builder. This was probably the worst job that I ever had. Only because I was hired full-time kind of as a favor for a relative who also worked there, but there really wasn't 40 hours a week worth of work for me to do, so I would come in the morning and I'd do like an hour's worth of work, and then I just kind of had to look busy for the rest of the day. Now this may seem awesome if you're a person that doesn't really want to work hard, but I get bored pretty quick, and I really like having projects to work on, so having spent the entire summer pretending to be busy so they didn't send me home without pay was not ideal. I also worked for a while as a server at a chain pizza place, which was kind of exciting for a while, and I made really good money in tips, but it wasn't that fun. So at this point in time, I've had all these jobs, and I'm only about 21 years old, so I've had a million jobs, and I'm about halfway through a degree in journalism. And this is the point in my life where I started to transition out of service jobs and into jobs that are more explicitly connected to a future career. So I worked as a magazine intern for a little bit for an alt-political magazine. I worked as an editor for an online magazine. For a while after I finished university, I worked as an associate editor for a magazine for lawyers, which is more exciting than it sounds. And I spent a couple of years working as a freelance writer. So I wrote about everything from magic to psychopaths to what that weird construction project is down the street and how it's going to affect the neighborhood. I worked in journalism for about 2.5 years, and I loved it. But at that point, I started to get a little antsy for a change, so I decided to go back to school, and I became a teacher. I kept freelancing a little bit throughout this, and I took some jobs here and there. I worked at a drugstore for a little while. And then when I finished teacher's college, I started working at Starbucks to pay the bills while I applied to teaching jobs. For those of you looking for part-time jobs, especially if you get a little bit older, Starbucks was a really good place to work. I got benefits and a lot of free coffee. I took the job because I thought it might take me a while to get a job teaching, but luckily I got hired right away, and I continued both teaching and Starbucks for way too long. So a typical day for me would be I would work all day at school. I'd leave at about 3:30 to work a closed shift at Starbucks, which was 3:30 or 4 o'clock to 11:30. And then if I had a few minutes to spare in between those two jobs or during shift breaks, I would work on freelance writing projects I was still juggling. If you can hear that weird whining sound in the background, that is my cat. I've been away for the weekend, and she's really upset that I just got home and I'm now working. So just ignore that. Now, going back to working crazy hours, I definitely do not recommend working 3 jobs that total 100 hours a week. It sucked. But while it was difficult, I learned a lot about time management, resilience, and teamwork. And that's the point I want to end on. In my roughly 15 years of work experience, I've had a ton of jobs, and each one taught me something valuable that I've been able to bring forward into my next position. I learned a lot about communication and team building working at the mall, and about forming connections with people at Starbucks. My work in journalism taught me to empathize with people and how to explain complicated ideas to an audience that isn't always super interested, which is, in a nutshell, what teaching is all about. I also got really good at getting people to tell me things that they did not want to tell me, which, again, is kind of one of the tricks of being a teacher. All the jobs I've had have taught me problem solving, resilience, initiative, and generally that there's a sense of pride to be had in hard work, whether I'm shelving books to the library or steaming milk for lattes or teaching a group of high schoolers how to pronounce the word hyperbole. That's hyperbole, not hyperbole. If you've been pronouncing it wrong this whole way, just move on and don't tell your English teachers that you've been doing it wrong. So now that I've told you about my first jobs, I want you to go find someone else's first jobs. So that brings me to your first task. Go talk to someone who's a little bit older than you and has had more than a few jobs. Try to find someone who's had at least 5, but 7 would be better. You're going to look for someone who's probably at least in their mid-20s. That could be an older sibling, or maybe your parents, or a friend, or even just one of the teachers or staff at your school. And once you've got your list of jobs, go to the discussion forum titled My First 7 Jobs. Not that hard to find. And list them just in order and write a couple sentences about what you think one valuable skill might have been that they learned along the way. So make sure to check out your classmates' posts as well and comment on a few. My hope for this is that it'll enlighten you to some of the entry-level jobs out there and should be particularly useful if you're in the process of applying to your first jobs, which at 14 and 15 years old, I'm assuming a lot of you are. And that's it. Welcome to Careers class, and let's get started.